Thanks, Alex. I'm super happy to be here. You started kind of like introducing a little bit to what we do at Hugging Face. The high level, we're like the most popular machine learning platform today that more than 10,000 companies are using, including Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Grammarly, that you can see on my slide on our homepage here. We're kind of like a platform for companies to build better machine learning. And today I didn't want to talk too much about the intricacies of our platform of what we do, but I wanted to talk about a topic that I feel really personally that we need to talk more about, which is machine learning ethics, right? In a way, why and how to care about machine learning ethics. And the reason why I think now is the right time to talk and focus more on machine learning ethics is because usually when you want to kind of like think about when is a good time to talk about ethics in technology, you want to look at two things. First, you want to look at how much harm the technology can do. And second, you want to look at how many people it can impact, right? I think for both of these things, we're very much at the turning point today for machine learning and natural language processing. So first, if you look at how much harm it can do, I think it's important to remind everyone that current models are extremely biased. Here, I took the BERT model, which is arguably the most popular machine learning model today. And I tried it to fill the missing words with a task that is called fill mask, with like this man works as and this woman works as. And of course, when you say this man works as, you're gonna get the prediction of lawyer, carpenter, doctor, waiter, mechanic. Whereas for a woman, you're gonna get nurse, waitress, teacher, maid, and procedures. So models today are extremely biased, right? And that can be a big problem if you start to think about, how I use, for example, this model for resume filtering, for hiring, or things like that. Then when it comes to how many people it impacts, I wanted to take 4 different products that are amongst like the most popular today. The first one is Google. They said now that most of the queries are powered by transformer models. So it's heavily used for ranking, heavily used for new features. Also, here I put an example of something called question answering. When you're gonna ask a question, it's going to show you the relevant answer right away in the page. Another example of massive use of machine learning is autocomplete that you can find now on Gmail, but you find it on LinkedIn, you find it on most social networks, on most messaging apps, even on your phone, that is powered by modern machine learning models. Another example of how popular and mainstream the technology is getting is automatic translation that you can see everywhere from Facebook, Twitter, on hundreds of different languages. Super useful for me as a French speaker, as you can hear from my accent, but you can find them really like everywhere. And the last thing is even in more like technical products, you might have seen that GitHub a few weeks ago announced the release of Copilot, which is an autocomplete powered by transformers to autocomplete your code. All of these are powered by transformers and are extremely mainstream, right? If you think of these products, billions of people are using them every day. So it's important now to think about ethics because these models are so mainstream, right? So this is one of the reasons why at Hugging Face we decided to get really serious about the topic, and why we have been lucky to bring on board Dr. Margaret Mitchell, who created and co-led the ML AI ethics group at Google. who's going to help us kind of like think about all these topics and integrate all these topics into our platform. Most of the concepts and the slides that I'm gonna show you in this talk are actually directly from Dr. Margaret Mitchell. So how can you think about ethics in AI, right? So first, it's important to keep in mind that it's not supposed to provide the answer to every problem, to every context in an abstract way. It's more kind of like a methodology or a way to analyze problems in light of human values, right? And these values, human values, everyone has their own values. Every company has their own values. They can be things like honor, kindness, equity, inclusion, commitment, cooperation, connect, honesty, integrity, right? Now that you've kind of like integrated that, building machine learning ethically is integrating values into the processes. Let's look at what a typical machine learning process is. It's usually like 4 phases. You start with the kind of like the training data, then you train your model, then you do some post-processing, and then finally your model is used and interact with users. Now let's kind of like look a little bit at how each of these steps can be biased depending on your values. First, on the training data, one of the main challenges is that before even getting the data, usually the data is a social construct. It's especially true for text, right? We all know that text is a social construct. And so you have a lot of human biases that have been embedded into this text, right? When you think about a big transformer models like BERT, GPT, T5, Roberta, all these models have been trained on a slice of the web, right? Even the web from Reddit, from Twitter, from places like that. And so you're gonna find some like reporting biases, selection biases, stereotyping, racism, underrepresentation, and more. Then when you go into the training of the model, there are a lot of problems there. For example, picking the default model, that's what we call default effect. If you pick BERT without really thinking too much about it, because that's what everyone is using. But also challenges like overfitting, underfitting, anchoring biases, and more. Then when you go after you've trained your models and you go into kind of like the software that is surrounding the model and the post-processing, again, you have more human biases, right? Here you have kind of like the classic story of the team that was trying to remove the ability and the propension of a model to talk about sex, right? So they kind of like filtered after the fact everything when it comes to that was kind of like containing the word sex, but then it creates like big problems in terms of like underrepresentation, for example, because when you start to talk about transsexuality, then it's filtered out, right? And finally, when it comes to how users are using these models, what's interesting is that when users are using your models to create more content, then there can be some sort of kind of like a network effect or some sort of kind of like laundering effect. I think Dr. Margaret Mitchell is calling it the bias laundering, where, for example, for autocomplete, when you have your users create content thanks to autocomplete, if the autocomplete is biased, then it's going to go back into publishing on the web, and most likely is going to be used by the next generation of models that are training on the web, right? So what we're seeing here is that ML development is not value neutral, right? It creates a lot of like, it creates and integrates a lot of human biases. But what's interesting, I think, is because you have kept like this sort of like network effects that can be negative if you increase the biases. If you manage to mitigate these biases, hopefully you manage to create like a positive circle and impact society and mitigate at large scale the biases, right? Now, when you know about these biases, you know about this concept of bias laundering, you can think for each step what you can do to kind of like mitigate these biases, right? And so for training, it's things like copyright of data instances. It's looking at consent of data providers, fair pay for annotators, diversity in what the data represents. Then when you think about the training, you want to focus on appropriateness of loss function, appropriateness of models, looking at which model is the best for which use case, evaluation of your models. Then you look at, for the post-processing, you look at fairness of outcome, diversity of choices, inclusion of the user, stereotype removal and more. And then finally, when you look at the usage and users interacting with your machine learning systems, look at things like minimizing social harm, reducing dual use of your models, or boosting positive use cases, right? And all of that kind of like helps you really kind of like break this cycle of biases, right? And I wanted to kind of like not stay only kind of like theoretical, but give you two examples of what we've put in place at Hugging Face to integrate more of our values into the way we build our platform and how we shape the ecosystem. So the first one is we have a huge amount of models that are being shared on the Hugging Face platform. I think now it's over 30,000 models that have been shared. And so what we put in place is something called the model cards that have been invented by Margaret Mitchell and the team at Google, which creates transparent documentation for things like benefits, harms, risks, uses, users, intentional or not, metrics, why metrics were chosen, evaluation tests and results. What it allows is to kind of like reduce a little bit the bias, for example, in selection of the models, right? We've been lucky to see more than 5,000 model cards that have been created so far, and which are kind of like really impacting kind of like this stage, both of kind of like the training, but also selection of data sets and models for everyone in the community. The other thing that we've done when it comes to usage and the ability to access models and data and research, whatever your language, is that we organized a sprint where we've had more than 500 researchers and data scientists all over the world, which expanded the capabilities of speech to text and speech models in general to over hundreds of what we call low resource languages, which are languages that are not as much studied or worked on. And what it creates is kind of like some more democratization, some more broader access to the technology, to remove some of the representation biases that we have sometimes, for example, with people focusing too much on English and then on English stereotypes, right? So these are two examples, and we believe this is just the beginning for what we call, what Margaret Mitchell calls value-informed machine learning. There's so much potential to include processes like that into machine learning and NLP to improve the outcome of these models, to be a positive force in the world. If you think about a lot of our society's problems, from like climate change, vaccines, toxicity of public platforms, machine learning can and should help. For example, obviously, a lot of you were probably listening to not the Facebook, the Meta keynote earlier this afternoon. Obviously, on social networks, you can't have a human to check for racist and violent comments for all of them. So we need machine learning, NLP models, and transformers to help with value-informed processes. And we believe at Hugging Face this is a way for transformers, for machine learning, for this new generation of machine learning, not only to be useful, but really to be helpful and positive for the world. So this is it for me. If you're interested in continuing the conversation about ethics in machine learning, but also happy to talk about transformers, transfer learning, or Hugging Face in general, feel free to join the Q&A session that is happening after in a different platform, or to reach out to me on Twitter or by email. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Clement. That's a really great overview of the ethics of AI. This kind of presents a blueprint, right? But one question I'd like to ask you is about community, right? So I think the Big Science is a really strong community effort, and it has, I think, an ethics working group, which is, I think, one of the largest actually, right? Because it's a multidisciplinary group, and not just coders can be there, but also ethicists and philosophers. And so I think it's a really diverse group. So what do you think of the role of community in kind of building this ethics of AI directions? Where do you see is the most important focus for the community to help? And how do you see that kind of community working with industry in the space?
Yeah. So what's really exciting about the Big Science project is that it's trying to put like ethical consideration and value-informed consideration at the starting point of the process rather than an afterthought, right? And that's what's been done a lot, I think, in the past. Researchers would work on a project and a machine learning model, and then 1 week before releasing, they would be like, oh, we have to think about like ethical considerations. What we've been doing, what the community has been doing with Big Science is starting actually with ethical considerations from the get-go. So this is really exciting to see. And when it comes to kind of like the most important and interesting topics, for me, I'm really excited about transparency and explainability, right? Because I think they will allow us to understand better what are like the challenges, what are the biases of these new transformers. I'm super excited about that. And then I'm super excited about some of the bias mitigation that we start to be able to explore, for example, in the data sets. So for example, we're gonna release soon, thanks to the team of Dr. Margaret Mitchell, a tool that allows you to explore your large data sets in a better way and kind of like notice some of the biases in these data sets. So I'm really excited also about that, about how you can help with tools detecting biases in data sets and obviously remove them to start really acting into the mitigation of biases.
Thank you for that. That's really good. And one more question for me. I see some folks already kind of sending their questions. So before they type it, I'll ask another one. So I was thinking really, right? So we have all these hard ethics questions, right? For instance, should you allow certain comment in a Facebook post, right? And so I was thinking this is something that obviously we want to use as much machine learning as possible to do. But if you ever typed on Facebook, sometimes you would use a word which you will think is innocent, and it will flag you like I was doing in Russian and I was using some idiomatic words. Apparently they use machine translation and they flag you, they think the word is bad, although for Russian speakers, it is not bad, right? So somebody decided maybe on their global safety team, right? And maybe they asked some folks, or maybe they use machine translation. So we need humans, right? So kind of one kind of statement I wanted to see if you agree or not. Ultimately, ethics of AI is judged by humans because finally, right, like no computer can give the final judgment, right? You should always have recourse to humans. Do you agree with that?
I think you can really integrate your values into the technology that you're building, right? What's important is not to think that the product that you're building is value neutral, and then you need humans in addition to the product that you're building to bring these values. I think a product, a technology, a machine learning model can integrate some of the values that you hold as an individual, as a company, as a society. And we should aim at that, right? So we should aim at kind of like the moderation model that is used on Facebook to integrate the values that we wanted to integrate, right? And it's going to be circumstantial because Facebook values are probably not the same as Hugging Face values, which are probably different than other companies' values. But that's what we should aim at. And in addition to that, also have humans maybe help in the loop one way or another. But there are already humans creating the technology, the models, the algorithms, right? So they transmit their values into the product, right? And we just need to be cognizant of that, not ignore it, and make sure that the end result is consistent with the humans and the organization's values.
Okay, no, this is absolutely, I agree with that. But one thing I was thinking about, right? So let's say something is really hard for the AI as of today, right, to judge. And so maybe if we can do it algorithmically and we have very high confidence, right, we do that. But eventually it might come up before humans. For instance, if you do this with Facebook and it automatically flags you can say, no, I disagree. I want it to be reviewed by humans. So they have this oversight board. And eventually, if you object to something, like I objected to this classification because I thought this is a mistranslation or misunderstanding. And so because they say, why do you do this feedback? And because I said, because I want to improve Facebook quality, right? Because it's not necessarily about, disagreement on principle. It may be a technical disagreement or it may be a disagreement on principle. So I was thinking, right, that we probably need something like high-level validation of AI results, right? So, and currently what we have this human in the loop, where we treat humans like it's very low-cost disposable robots who will distinguish cats from dogs. So if we see how the humans are used right now in AI, I actually think that this is very kind of diminished and insufficient function because there are these huge farms as Facebook supposedly has where low-paid workers are sifting through horrible images to flag them, right? So we kind of use humans as really low-level image recognition devices, right? And so, but I think a lot of these ethics judgments will come at a high level where you will have to see, is this statement actually harmful? For instance, can it incite an uprising in India somewhere, right? Can it actually lead to loss of human life? And you may not be kind of satisfied. You may not have enough support if you employ, low-paid workers in some part of the world who are not actually familiar with the culture of another part of the world. So I'm wondering, I was thinking, how can we do that, right? And so one way to do that is to have what I call community validation hierarchy, similar to Wikipedia hierarchy. We need to have very reliable structure of human experts who can very quickly or reasonably quickly judge if this statement is ethical or not, because until we really build, very high level AI, we'll need this judgment, at least for training purposes. So what do you think of this kind of, effort? Do we need, maybe it's a part of the big science work, maybe it's a part of the Stanford CRFM Center, but, do you think that as a community, we need some high level hierarchical structure of experts, for instance, medical decision making, right? Can we say the model tells me cut this person and extract this thing, like, is it right or wrong? I need to consult a doctor. Do we need something like a hierarchy of high-level experts for validation of AI?
So first, I think something that sounds simple, but that is a lot of times actually forgotten today, is to make sure that the people who are building technology are value informed. That the people who are building the models today, the researchers in all the research labs, actually start from the value standpoint, which doesn't seem to be the case most of the time today, right? They think about, how do I increase accuracy? How do I build a bigger model? And they don't really think about values and impact of what they're working on. I think just adding that, and I think that's the point of Dr. Margaret Mitchell, which is the fact that the machine learning building process today is not value neutral, is that we need to make sure that everyone that is building machine learning today thinks about values, think about what is their values, what is their company's values, and integrate that when they create technology. And I think that we have solved a lot of our challenges. And then after, as you're talking more about, how they're used with users and how you can add humans in the loop, there are definitely kind of like new ways to invent there. I don't have all the answers, to be honest. It's very industry use case specific, right? So it depends on each company's use case. For example, you're talking about moderation for Facebook. I can't answer for Facebook. They are the expert there. But I think there are definitely new things and new tools to invent to be able to bring humans in the loop in kind of like a less like degrading way and in a less kind of like industrial way, and take advantage of actually the unique qualities of humans compared to algorithms, and create ways to mesh together humans and technology for better value informed technology.